Hello, everybody, and welcome to our show that doesn't have a name yet. My name is Boyan Stanislavski. I'm one of the editors of the Barricade, and today I'm discussing with Zhana Tsoneva, who is a Bulgarian left-wing activist and academic, about the ongoing social unrest and mass protests in Bulgaria. Welcome to the program, Zhana.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show.
Okay, so let's dive straight in. I think it's somewhat strange to an international news consumer, let's say that the Bulgarian population reacts massively in such a negative manner to the national prosecution taking action against leading politicians or their advisors, for that matter, as it happened in the case of the Bulgarian president Rumen Radev. And it would be expected normally the white public to cheer in such circumstances rather than protest them. So why is it so different in Bulgaria?
Thing is, this raid which the prosecution did on the president's office is completely unprecedented and illegal. And it was clearly a reprisal raid because the president confirmed that that security guards on public payroll have been doubling as private bodyguards for two of the most hated oligarchs in Bulgaria. So I think the reaction is totally understandable because this government has been suffering and producing a corruption scandal after corruption scandal. And I simply think people are basically getting sick of it.
Okay, so it sounds a bit like it's yet another outrage, yet another scandal of a whole series of corruption scandals. And corruption is a thing that normally in the West or in the international media, that's the phenomenon that Bulgaria is associated with, rightly or not, but that's the case. So I think it's understandable that the population reacts reacts when there's another such scandal happening. But now I know that you took part, or you are taking part actively in the protests because I've seen, the pictures of yours in the social media. Are you optimistic about what's going on and about this new wave of, as some media like to portray that, civic awakening?
To be honest, I'm not so optimistic, even if I really welcome these protests and especially the reaction they have triggered in Borisov. The Prime Minister Borisov is in total panic. He's been issuing these crazy conspiracy theories. He's really in disarray. So I cannot but welcome this. I'm not optimistic because the state of the opposition is quite bad. I mean, the main opposition party, the Socialist Party, is very weak and right now is in internal conflicts surrounding the election of the new leadership. We also have this small liberal coalition, which I don't think can transcend its very narrow social base, which is mostly in educated, property-owning citizens. And then we have, of course, a host of far-right parties, which we don't want anywhere near the executive. So for me, the worst that can happen is that Borisov will resign, which he has done each time since the 10 years that he assumed power. And then maybe he will be re-elected because the opposition is simply too weak.
Yeah, okay. Well, this was going to be my next question, because it seems to be like a perpetuating mechanism. There's a problem, be it a social or economic one, like it used to, like it was in 2013, or be it an ethical, moral, political one, like now. And people are taking to the streets. Borisov gets unhinged, resigns. Then next general election is called, and he wins again. And it seems like it's his mode of maintaining power and sustaining, his position in Bulgaria. And if it happens again, then what are we to expect? I mean, is it going to be just just another click in the system, and then a wave of demoralization will follow, and then we're going to wait until another corruption scandal or, I don't know, excessive pricing happens that will bring people out to the streets, and then we're probably going to be able to say pretty much the same thing about the opposition, because I can't remember when was it so that the Socialist Party would be a party worth any kind of attention, really. So if anything is going to change, then I'm afraid that in terms of the party structures existing today, be it in the opposition or in the government, things are only going to be getting worse. So, the natural question here would be a chance. Is there any energy in this protest that could be translated, maybe on a later stage, into forming a new structure that is somehow outside the regime that is obviously, well, to put it mildly, not working for the people and has not been working for the people for the last 3 decades?
To be honest, if there will be snap elections, I don't think there is time to make a new party. Most likely the protests are going to buttress the existing political forces, especially Bulgaria, whose leader actually triggered the protest by disembarking on that privatized beach. One positive thing that I see in the protest is that for the first time since 1989, people supporting the president or people from the Socialist Party marched together with liberals, which is quite unprecedented. So maybe in the future we could see something like, although it sounds completely preposterous, but this is the only hope, some form of a coalition between these two. Otherwise, we will see a repetition of the typical governing formulas where GERB unites either with the far right or perhaps with this a movement for rights and liberties, whose leader, Dogan, privatized the beach and built that McMansion there, which is going to be a disaster. Or the worst thing probably would be the socialists ruling with this Dogan party. So for me, the only hope would be if there are elections that the socialists somehow manage to overcome their traditional antagonisms with the liberals and, create some kind of a national salvation coalition or something like that. I don't think there's any other way in the short term. Of course, we should always be working for a long-term solution to this. But in the short term, I don't see any other way.
Okay, but what is the long-term solution? Because for me, at least, as a person, close to Bulgaria, but observing the things there from relatively long distance, to me, the solution is to somehow break with the path that we have been put on since, generally speaking, since 1989. So is there any chance, even in a longer perspective, that are there any groups, minority groups, active minorities somewhere in the public sphere that you could refer to and say, well, these are potential structures, that could give a potential beginning to some kind of new political movement, new political life? Because of course, I think it would make sense for probably the Socialist Party and the Liberals to form some kind of, as you called it, national salvation coalition or something like that. This has very little chance to actually change the system, or change the way things are going or have been unfolding for the last decades. And I'm not sure if the Socialist Party, which is a party it carries the name socialist but it's a party where on 1 square centimeter you have like 5 millionaires at least. So, I'm just thinking that, okay, we might get rid of Boyko Borisov, who is the impersonification of the mafia-style capitalism that developed in Bulgaria. But then we're going to have different faces. We're going to have the face, a liberal face, a left social democratic face, maybe. And yet things are going to continue the same way. So I'm just thinking if this mass experience of people in Bulgaria in various cities and towns does provide some sort of hope for a new thing, for a new phenomenon on the Bulgarian political arena?
That's a tough one. It's really a tough one. Maybe the only feasible thing that I see can happen is to broaden this right now very narrow understanding of anti-corruption as involving only or concerning mostly the security of private property, the business climate, rule of law, and this kind of stuff. We need to broaden this stuff to start including things that concern the majority of Bulgarians, which is the wide injustices in the workplace. And this is the space where we spend most of our time. What can be a winning formula is broadening this anti-corruption discourse, which concerns mainly business people, because it impinges mostly on the security of private property and the business climate, and the rule of law, of course, which has direct relevance to market competition and market shares. And so it needs to be broadened to start including also social issues like this quite marginal party, such as the Bulgaria, can actually broaden its appeal, and maybe it can lead to some kind of, okay, I'm not talking about systemic change, because really this sounds completely impossible given the current configuration of political forces, but it can work towards bettering a bit the conditions for the vast majority of people, and not just for the big business owners who are the direct victims of these crazy corruption wars.
Okay, but then the last question here is, who is the most radical, or can you define the most radical wing of the protests? Because at least from my Polish experience, so to say, and I guess to an extent at least it's similar because it's Eastern European one, then those who are actually winning, those who are benefiting, maybe I should say, from the popular frustration, from the piling anger, are those who are most radical in their demands. And in our case, it happened to be, the Catholic fundamentalists and the right-wing extremist forces, which of course is very bad. Yet it shows a certain pattern that in times of major conflicts and in times of major frustration, popular frustration, because people are poor, and I think this frustration is even bigger in Bulgaria because people are even poorer, or like much poorer than here. Bulgaria is the poorest country in the EU, and I sometimes jokingly, the colleagues, that we should perhaps include Moldova in the EU so that we are not the poorest all the time. But so what I'm trying to say is that there is a chance, maybe, that if there is a radical element, or if it pops up suddenly in this climate, that it could actually lead to some kind of change. Again, probably it's not going to be a systemic change like it didn't happen in Poland, but it could be something that would turn the political life around, or at least make an impression of that. So are there some forces similar to the one I'm referring to in Poland, right-wing populists, as they like to call them these days? Is there a danger that this is all going to take that kind of direction?
I hear rumors that the far right indeed participates in the protests, especially in Varna. I saw TV coverage of this far right party actually leading the rallies. We saw them yesterday in Sofia as well. They have this kind of compact block of football hooligans and stuff. But to be honest, I don't think they're capable of gaining the upper hand over these protests. It's more like the protest is transforming them, because I don't see the slogan, their indifference, for example, in the slogans in Varna and in Sofia. They all say Ostavka, which means resign. They all say the same things. So I don't think they are strong enough to hijack these rallies and turn them into a far right radical direction. They're more like liberalizing, through their own participation in them.
Okay, so they are not capable of dominating the protest, at least for now. And the very, very last question, please tell a few words about these statements made by the American embassy in Sofia, because Bulgaria, especially to the people that are somewhat interested more in the public cause and in international politics, appears to be a place which doesn't really have the capability to execute any kind of sovereignty, be it political or in any other respect, really. So, is this something to be concerned about? Because the statements, at least at first glance, they seem to be really bold. Particularly the first one, where it said that the protests are going to last between the 11th and the 16th of July, and people started scratching their head, asking, like, how do they know? It's.
Yeah, you're completely right. There are some interpretations which say that the U.S. embassy is giving Borisov a very clear signal that he has to resign, which might be the case. I don't know. I don't have access to this, as we call it, zadkulissia, diplomatic backrooms and whatnot. What seemed quite certain until now was that Borisov had sort of bought the support of the US, because last year Bulgaria signed this preposterous contract for, if I'm not mistaken, 8 F-16 planes under huge pressure from the US. And yes, we are the poorest country, but we spend billions on this crap that we don't need. And he was kind of pretty certain that, he has the back of the US, but now the US sort of seems to be turning against him. So we'll see how it goes. It can be a sign that they don't want him anymore, although this doesn't answer the question what comes after, because if there are snap elections, he's very likely to win them even without a majority. We'll see.
Yeah, that's true. Well, let's hope that this perpetuating mechanism of reproducing pathologies all the time really comes to an end at some point. Unfortunately, and that's my negative conclusion, is that whatever comes after doesn't have to be necessarily better than what we're living in right now. But anyway, let's hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
But it also cannot get worse than that, because we don't have an army, really. We cannot degenerate into some kind of military junta. So for me, what we have right now is the worst, and maybe from now on it can slowly get better.
Yeah, well, maybe. Although how the saying goes, that the optimist says, "Well, it cannot get any worse." Yet, no, sorry, the other way around. The pessimist says it cannot get any worse, and the optimist says, "Oh, it can." So, well, anyway, let's see. Thank you, Zhana Tsoneva, for the discussion and for the valuable insight.
Thank you.